Chapter 16. The Ignition. The stale scent of yesterday's coffee hung in the air of my condo, a familiar aroma that usually grounded me. Sunlight, muted by the dusty blinds of my study window, sliced across stacks of financial reports and budget forecasts. I sat in my leather chair, the city's distant hum a constant, low thrum beneath the floorboards. Yet the familiar confines felt different today, charged with a low-voltage current that hadn't been there before. Elena Laurent. Her name wasn't just another entry in the Veridian budget reports anymore. It resonated in the quiet space, impossible to ignore. I pictured her face, the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the tightly coiled energy beneath the dancer's poise. It wasn't just her fierce defense of her colleagues, or her accusations about the company's financial practices, though those had certainly caught my attention. It was the intensity, the way she'd spoken during our confrontation. Not with fluttering panic, but with a fierce, almost defiant control that hinted at deeper currents, higher stakes. That intensity had reawakened something within me, something that the routine grind of spreadsheets and variance analyses had dulled. I felt my analytical instincts sharpen, the familiar focus returning, the desire to peel back layers, to understand what was really happening at Veridian, and with Elena specifically. I rolled my neck, the vertebrae cracking, and pushed myself up from the desk. The preliminary research phase was over. The time for reviewing documents and reconciling figures was giving way to direct observation. The lingering stillness was over. It was time to move. I had started where logic dictated. The theater building, the imposing brick structures that rose against the late afternoon sky, its facade warmed by the setting sun. I parked across the street, positioning myself with a clear view of the stage door, and settled into the practiced stillness of observation. I watched the dancers filter out after what appeared to be the day's final rehearsals. They emerged in twos and threes, looking exhausted but still moving with that distinctive grace that marked them as dancers even in street clothes. I scanned each face, cataloging gaits and mannerisms with my usual analytical attention to detail. Then, she appeared. Even in worn practice clothes with her hair pulled back severely, Elena moved with a contained precision that set her apart. There was no lingering, no casual chat with the others. Her eyes scanned the street briefly, a habitual check of her surroundings that struck me as both professional and slightly paranoid, before she turned and walked briskly toward the main avenue where the bus stop was located. For the first 2 days, this was the pattern. Class, a quick walk, the number 14 bus, toward her apartment. I followed at a distance the first day, noting her route without getting close enough to be detected. Establish baseline patterns, the first principle of any thorough audit or analysis. While the direct surveillance yielded little deviation, I had also pursued other information channels. I met with a contact, Marco, a freelance lighting technician with exhausted eyes and extensive knowledge of the city's performance venues, who sometimes provided useful insights into the arts scene. I found him at his usual corner table in a dimly lit bar frequented by theater staff. "So what brings the C-suite slumming with the working man?" Marco asked, nursing what looked like his second whiskey. I didn't mention Elena directly. Instead, I steered the conversation toward independent dance companies, experimental venues, anything outside the mainstream. "Heard about anything interesting lately? New venues? Unusual performances? That sort of thing?" Marco swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "Different? Always different, man. Someone's always trying to reinvent the wheel, usually badly. Lot of hustle, not much payoff." He mentioned a few names. A couple of short-run experimental performances in warehouse spaces. Nothing clicked. "Why? You looking for talent or trouble?" He smirked. "Just staying informed," I replied non-committally, sliding a folded bill across the sticky bar top toward Marco's glass. "Curiosity." Marco pocketed the money with a practiced flick of his wrist. "Well, keep your ear out. Strange gigs happen in strange places. Sometimes invite-only stuff. You hear whispers, but pinning them down." He shrugged, the universal sign-off of depleted knowledge or waning interest. It was a dead end, for now. After the meeting, I had retreated back to my office, analyzing the fragments I'd gathered. The overheard snippets from the bar, the visual replay of Elena's route, the memory of her confronting me in the corridor at Veridian. It all swirled in my mind as I tried to establish connections. I replayed our interactions. Had she mentioned specific times she felt unsafe? Late nights, yes, but frustratingly vague. Elena's fierce intensity remained the anchoring point. This wasn't just about feeling watched. It felt targeted, specific. The question was, why? Finally on Wednesday, my observations brought the deviation I'd been waiting for. The rehearsal ended at the usual time. The dancers emerged. Elena appeared, scanning the street with that same brief, assessing glance, but instead of turning toward the bus stop, she hesitated. She checked her phone, her silhouette tense under the sodium glare of the streetlights. I leaned forward slightly, my focus sharpening. Something was different tonight. The air felt charged, expectant. A minute passed. Then, headlights cut through the twilight gloom from the opposite direction of the usual traffic flow. A modest sedan, with heavily tinted windows that I had followed before, pulled smoothly to the curb about 30 feet past her. It didn't belong. The engine idled, low and guttural. Elena didn't look surprised. She gave one quick glance back toward the academy entrance, then walked directly to the passenger side of the sedan. The door opened from the inside. She slipped in without a backward look, the door closing with a solid, definitive thunk. The car pulled away from the curb almost immediately, accelerating smoothly and disappearing around the corner. I committed the license plate to memory as the vehicle moved away. The make and model were expensive, anonymous, and utterly out of sync with a struggling dancer's routine exit via public transport. This wasn't random. This wasn't just a friend offering a ride. The timing, the vehicle, Elena's lack of surprise coupled with her evident caution, was deliberately orchestrated, calculated. I started my engine, the quiet hum a counterpoint to the sudden acceleration of my pulse. The baseline was broken. The trail, faint but undeniable, had just revealed its first concrete marker. What had been a financial investigation was expanding into something more complex. The hunt had truly begun. I kept my distance, the faint scent of exhaust and damp pavement filtering through my car's vents as I followed the dark gray sedan through the city. It didn't head toward the glittering high-rises downtown or the sprawling quiet of the residential neighborhoods. Instead, it cut through increasingly silent streets, the sounds of traffic receding, replaced by the whisper of tires on asphalt. Eventually it turned into the arts district, with its commercial buildings, high-end antique dealers, and galleries, respectable businesses whose windows were now dark, reflecting the empty streetlights like vacant eyes. This was it. This is where the trail had run cold before. The sedan slowed, then turned smoothly into a narrow, cobbled alleyway running behind a row of elegant three-story brick buildings. The air here was suddenly still, carrying the faint, earthy smell of old brick and damp moss growing between the uneven stones. It stopped midway down, its engine cutting off with a final, soft sigh, plunging the immediate vicinity into a heavy silence, broken only by the distant, muffled thump of bass from some unseen source, and the ever-present low hum of the city beyond the alley's confines. I parked at the alley's entrance, killing the lights, the sudden darkness feeling thick, almost viscous. Through the gathering dusk, I watched Elena emerge from the passenger side, the soft click of the door latch echoing slightly in the enclosed space. The driver remained unseen behind the tinted glass. She didn't pause, her boots tapping briefly, sharply, on the cobbles before she reached the building wall. She walked directly to a heavy, dark-painted steel door set flush into the brickwork, its surface cold and matte, absorbing the limited light. The door was utterly devoid of markings. No name, no number, just a small, dark, convex circle that I recognized as a camera lens mounted discreetly above, gleaming faintly like an insect's eye, and a small, brushed metal intercom panel beside the frame. Elena didn't press a button. She gave 3 sharp, distinct raps on the metal itself. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was flat, percussive, swallowed quickly by the surrounding brick. After a moment, a faint, oily click echoed, the sound of a heavy bolt retracting, and the door swung silently inward, just enough for her to slip through into utter blackness beyond. It closed just as silently behind her, sealing the hidden world once more. The sedan waited another 30 seconds, a silent, dark predator, then pulled away, its tires crunching softly on grit before accelerating down the alley and disappearing from view. I remained in my car, the engine off, processing what I'd just witnessed. This wasn't a standard stage door. The car, Elena's practiced directness, the specific knock, the sheer, dense anonymity of the door, it all pointed to something deliberately concealed. The building itself appeared well-maintained, the brickwork clean, the window frames on the upper floors subtly suggesting quality beneath layers of paint, but the ground level facing the alley was a carefully constructed blank slate, opulence hidden in plain sight. Nocturne. Getting in was the next challenge. I needed finesse, not brute force. I waited nearly 20 minutes, the silence punctuated only by the scuttling of unseen vermin and the distant wail of a siren, before another vehicle arrived. A sleek European coupe that gleamed like wet obsidian even in the low light. A man in a sharply tailored suit emerged, spoke briefly into the intercom, and was buzzed in immediately. A different protocol for a different type of visitor, clearly. I considered my options. Direct approach seemed the most efficient way forward. I got out of my car, the alley air feeling cool and damp against my skin, carrying the smell of distant rain and something else, faintly acrid. I straightened my jacket, understated but high quality, its familiar weight settling on my shoulders, and walked purposefully toward the steel door. I ignored the impassive camera lens. Focusing on the intercom panel, I pressed the single, unmarked button, the metal smooth and cold beneath my fingertip. A moment of charged silence, then a crackle, and a voice, electronically filtered, devoid of inflection. "Yes?" I kept my own voice level, pitched slightly lower, adding a faint edge of impatience. "Julian Stonewall. I'm expected." I used my real name, projecting a confidence I didn't entirely feel, employing the same authoritative tone I used when closing critical deals at Stonewall Development. Another pause, longer this time. The silence pressed in. I could feel the weight of the unseen scrutiny from the camera, the alley's damp chill seeping into my clothes. "One moment," the voice said finally, flatly. The line clicked off with metallic finality. I waited, maintaining a relaxed posture while keeping my senses hyper-alert, cataloging the faint sounds, dripping water somewhere nearby, the soft sigh of wind at the alley's entrance. Finally, the distinct thunk click of an electronic lock disengaging sounded, louder this time, resonant against the steel. The door opened inward a foot, releasing a brief whisper of worn air, carrying a complex scent. I pushed it open further, the heavy door swinging smoothly, silently on well-oiled hinges, and stepped inside. The transition was immediate, absolute. I wasn't in a dingy back corridor but a small, exquisitely designed antechamber. The air was instantly warmer, drier, perfectly still, the chaotic sounds and smells of the alley completely erased. The silence here was different, profound, controlled. Walls were paneled in dark, polished wood, mahogany, perhaps, cool and smooth to the eye, reflecting faint highlights. The floor was covered in a thick, plush Persian rug, its intricate patterns absorbing light and sound, muffling my footsteps into non-existence. Ahead, another heavy door, this one solid oak, stood closed. To my right sat a small, antique desk of inlaid wood, its surface gleaming under a single, low-wattage lamp. Behind it stood a man who seemed to materialize from the shadows, tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a dark suit that fit perfectly. With a coiled, translucent earpiece subtly visible against his neck, he wasn't overtly threatening, but his stillness was palpable. His eyes, dark and watchful, took in my presence in a single, swift assessment. He simply nodded, a minimal, almost imperceptible dip of his chin that didn't invite conversation, and gestured with one hand toward the inner oak door. Security, seamless and absolute. I pushed open the second door, its weight substantial, and stepped into Nocturne proper. If the antechamber was a buffer, this was another reality entirely. The dominant impression was one of carefully curated twilight, a world existing perpetually just before dawn or just after dusk. The lighting was incredibly dim, artful, emanating from hidden sources, cove lighting, bleeding soft color down walls, floor-level spots casting long, distorted shadows, creating intimate pools of warm illumination around clusters of seating while leaving faces tantalizingly obscured. Deep blues and rich purples washed over alcoves and corners, contrasting with the warm amber glow near the bar. Strategically placed pin spotlights highlighted strange, abstract sculptures of twisted metal or polished stone, making them seem to float in the darkness. The air itself felt different, heavy and complex. The primary notes were expensive, exotic perfumes, heady florals, smoky oud, spicy orientals, drifting and mingling as patrons moved. Beneath this, the faint, sweet aroma of high-grade tobacco or rare cigars, and the clean scent of expensive leather. And still, persistently weaving through it all, that subtle, almost subliminal tang, not metallic this time but closer to ozone, the charged smell of the air after lightning, sharp and electric, hinting at something potent beneath the layers of cultivated luxury. The music was a physical presence. A low, pulsing electronic beat that seemed to vibrate up through the soles of my shoes, interwoven with the mournful, sensual slide of a live cello and breathy, digitally fractured vocal samples that hinted at words without forming them. It created a soundscape that felt both sophisticated and primal. The ambient noise was a texture in itself. The soft swish of silk, the heavier drape of velvet, the sharp clink of heavy crystal glasses meeting ice, the liquid sounds of drinks being poured at the bar. A palpable sense of anticipation hung in the air, a collective held breath. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out the clientele more clearly. A curated ecosystem, men in expensive, impeccably tailored suits conferring quietly in plush velvet armchairs, their faces half hidden in shadow, expensive watches glinting briefly as they gestured. Women with striking, sculpted faces and artistic intensity, draped in fabrics that shimmered subtly even in the low light. Jewel-toned silks, intricate lace, sharp architectural designs. There were younger patrons too, dressed in studied avant-garde styles, their expressions a careful blend of world-weary ennui and watchful curiosity. They looked like artists who'd found success, financiers seeking escape, academics pursuing obscure pleasures, collectors hunting the rarest prize, the elite of both wealth and cultural capitals. They moved with an easy, languid confidence, a shared, unspoken understanding that they belonged here. They weren't merely customers. They were initiates, part of the fabric of this hidden world. The layout unfolded as I scanned the room from near the entrance. Directly ahead, the floor dipped slightly into a central space. Perhaps a dance floor or performance stage, currently empty but dramatically lit from below. The light catching faint scuff marks on the polished dark wood, hinting at passionate movement. To my left stretched the long, sleek bar, its counter a single piece of polished black marble, cool and deep, reflecting the rows of gleaming bottles, and the bartender's focused movements like a dark mirror. Beyond the bar, arranged with geometric precision, were groupings of luxurious seating, low-slung couches upholstered in dark leather that sighed faintly when someone shifted, deep velvet armchairs that invited sinking into, small, heavy tables of dark wood or smoked glass. Each grouping felt like a private island in the dim sea of the room. Darker corners and alcoves beckoned, partially obscured by heavy velvet curtains, the color of midnight blue, or by tall, intricately carved wooden screens that threw complex patterns of shadow. These spaces hinted at deeper levels of privacy, unseen encounters, conversations not meant to be overheard. The entire space felt meticulously designed to control sightlines and sound, creating pockets of intense intimacy and deliberate obscurity within the larger communal theater. It was a stage set for secrets, desires, and transactions hidden from the everyday world. I moved toward the bar, letting my gait mimic the unhurried pace of the other patrons, adopting the posture of someone familiar with exclusivity, someone assessing the vintage, not desperately searching. The cool marble of the bar top felt smooth beneath my hand as I rested it there. I needed to orient myself, melt into the chiaroscuro backdrop. This wasn't just a club. It was an environment, a meticulously crafted illusion existing just beneath the skin of the ordinary city. And somewhere within this labyrinth of shadows, scents, and whispers, Elena moved. I ordered a whiskey. Neat. The heavy crystal tumbler felt solid, anchoring in my hand. The amber liquid caught the low light, glowing like trapped fire. I took a slow sip, the smoky peat stinging my tongue, followed by a slow warmth spreading through my chest, grounding me. My eyes, now fully adjusted to the dimness, methodically scanned the faces, the shifting figures in the pools of light and shadow, searching for the fierce, controlled intensity that had ignited this trail in the first place. I lingered at the polished black marble bar, the heavy crystal tumbler cool and solid in my hand. The whiskey's smoky scent mingled with the complex perfumes and the charged air of Nocturne. I took another slow sip, a grounding sensation amidst the stimulating environment. With my financial analyst's eye, I began assessing angles, sightlines, potential observation points. The plush, deep armchairs offered comfort, but poor visibility, and risked drawing attention if occupied alone. The shadowed alcoves promised concealment but felt too much like hiding, too far removed from the room's central energy. I needed proximity without presence. My gaze settled on a spot near the far end of the bar, where it curved toward a structural pillar draped in heavy, dark fabric. Standing there, I could lean casually against the pillar's base, partially obscured, with a clear, diagonal view of the dimly lit central performance space. It offered a vantage point that felt natural, allowing me to observe without being easily observed. The same principles I applied when analyzing competing businesses during acquisitions. Nursing my drink, I drifted toward it, my movements measured, weaving non-committally through the sparse clusters of patrons. I settled against the cool, fabric-covered support, the faint vibration of the club's sub-bass traveling through it into my shoulder blades. I raised the glass, took another sip, and waited, all senses on high alert. The shift, when it came, was subtle at first, a gradual deepening of the already profound dimness throughout the main seating areas, as if a final layer of twilight had been drawn across the room. Conversations, already hushed, seemed to evaporate entirely, replaced by an expectant silence so complete that the clink of ice settling in a distant glass sounded unnaturally loud. The ambient music faded slowly, leaving only a low, resonant hum, like the thrumming of immense, unseen machinery deep beneath the floor. I felt the collective gaze of the room refocus toward the central space, a tangible shift in energy. Then, a sound. A single, deep, resonant gong struck somewhere unseen. The sound wasn't just heard. It was felt, vibrating through the floor, through the pillar I leaned against, settling deep in my chest as the last reverberations faded into the manufactured silence. The lighting on the central stage transformed. The subtle uplighting intensified, but now shifted to stark white, carving the space out of the surrounding darkness. Simultaneously, beams of intense, narrow light, the color of bruised plums and deep indigo, stabbed down from hidden fixtures above, crisscrossing the stage, creating a cage of light and shadow. A faint haze, smelling faintly of glycerin and something vaguely floral, began to drift across the floor, catching the beams, making them seem solid, tangible. The music returned, but utterly changed. A driving, complex rhythm started, built from layers of syncopated percussion. Sharp, metallic hits like striking steel, deep, booming tabla-like drums, and intricate skittering sounds like insectile chattering. Over this, a dissonant synth line snaked, cold and searching, punctuated by swells of low, guttural bass that pulsed rhythmically, insistently. It was music that bypassed thought, aiming directly for the spine, hypnotic and vaguely menacing. Into this cage of light, sound, and haze, the dancers emerged, not from the sides, but seemingly coalescing from the deepest shadows at the back of the stage space. 6 figures, moving with a slow, deliberate, almost ritualistic precision. Their initial movements were synchronized, angular, gestures sharp and controlled, as if enacting an ancient, forgotten rite. They formed patterns, dissolved them, reformed them, their bodies moving as one organism, fluid yet tightly controlled. Their costumes enhanced the effect. They wore garments of flowing black fabric, seemingly simple at first glance, but cut in asymmetric layers that swirled and billowed with their movements, alternately concealing and revealing limbs. Woven into the blackness were threads of dull silver or pewter that caught the harsh spotlights erratically, creating fleeting, unpredictable flashes, like moonlight on disturbed water or the glint of hidden blades. Their faces were partially obscured by shadow, by the fall of fabric, or by minimalist masks that covered the upper halves of their faces, leaving only mouths and jawlines visible, giving them an unsettling anonymity. The choreography was mesmerizing in its intricacy. It spoke of tension, of containment and release, of hidden power. There were moments of startling unison, where all 6 bodies would strike a complex pose simultaneously, holding it for a breath before dissolving into fluid motion again. Then, counter-rhythms would emerge, pairs breaking off, weaving around each other in complex, interlocking patterns before being reabsorbed into the whole. The precision was absolute, almost unnerving. It wasn't merely dance. It felt like a language spoken by the body, articulate and urgent, but in a dialect I couldn't quite comprehend. The air crackled with the energy they generated, the sheer physical discipline radiating outwards. I watched, my analytical mind cataloging the movements, the patterns, the skill, with the same focused attention I would give to a complex financial structure or merger agreement. I scanned the figures, searching for the one who had led me here. The similar costumes and masks, combined with the strategic use of shadow and blinding light, made individuals difficult to isolate initially. They were a collective, a single entity expressing a complex, perhaps dangerous, idea. Then, the formation shifted. The driving rhythm intensified, the bass becoming a physical pressure against my ribs. The group parted, creating a pathway from the back of the stage toward the center, and down this path, one figure moved differently, while the others maintained their precise, somewhat constrained movements at the periphery. This central figure moved with a new, raw energy. A single, piercing white spotlight snapped on, isolating her, bleaching the color from her costume, transforming the dull silver threads into blinding electric flashes. It was Elena. The transformation was staggering. This was not the woman I'd observed bundled in practical clothes, walking briskly to a bus stop. This was not the tightly controlled dancer confronting me in the Veridian corridor. The Elena on stage was an entirely different being, elemental, untamed, and the mask she wore was slightly different from the others, perhaps. Or maybe it was just the way the light hit the sharp planes of her lower face. But her jawline seemed fiercely defined, her mouth set in a line of intense concentration that blurred into passion. Her physicality was breathtaking. Where the group emphasized precision and unity, her movements exploded with a power that seemed barely contained. She wasn't just following choreography, she was devouring it, inhabiting it completely. One moment she was coiled energy, low to the ground, muscles bunched with tension. The next, she launched into a series of leaps and turns that seemed to defy gravity, her body slicing through the hazy air. Her movements were fluid, yes, but laced with a sharp, almost violent grace. There was a sinuous, serpentine quality to her transitions, flowing seamlessly into moments of startling, angular attack. She danced, as if possessed by the music, embodying its driving rhythm, its dissonant melody, its contained fury. Her costume, the same black and silver as the others, seemed different on her. The fabric clung and swirled, alternately revealing the taut lines of muscle in her back and legs, then concealing her in shadow, making her appear and disappear within the spotlight's glare. Sweat beaded on her visible skin, her neck, her arms, catching the light like scattered diamonds, testament to the fierce exertion. Her expression, visible even past the mask's edge, was a mask of its own, one of pure, unadulterated intensity. It wasn't a performance for the audience. It felt like an exorcism, a channeling of something profound and potentially dangerous from deep within. Passion, agony, defiance, vulnerability. It all flickered across her features, raw and unfiltered, even within the stylized context of the dance. Her eyes, when visible in a turn, weren't focused on the darkness beyond the stage, but seemed fixed on some inner landscape, a battleground only she could see. The sound of her breath, sharp and percussive, was faintly audible during the briefest pauses in the music, a raw, human counterpoint to the electronic pulse. The group dancers reformed around her, sometimes supporting her, sometimes seeming to challenge or contain her. The narrative, whatever it was, centered on her struggle, her power, her isolation even within the group. She was the focal point, the burning core around which the entire performance revolved. The light clung to her, the music swelled and crashed in response to her movements. She commanded the space, commanded the attention of everyone present, not through stage tricks, but through the sheer, undeniable force of her presence, and the raw authenticity pouring out of her. I glanced briefly away from the stage, scanning the audience. They were utterly transfixed. The sophisticated detachment I'd noted earlier had vanished. Faces were turned toward the stage, bathed in the reflected light, mouths slightly parted. There was no rustling, no coughing, no whispered commentary. The only sounds were the pounding music and the occasional, collective sharp intake of breath that followed a particularly demanding or emotionally charged sequence from Elena. The air hummed with their focused attention. They weren't just watching, they were consuming the performance, absorbing the energy radiating from the stage. This intense, almost voyeuristic experience was clearly the currency of Nocturne, the reason these people sought out this hidden place. They were witnessing something potent, something real beneath the artifice, channeled through the dancer in the spotlight. I turned back, drawn inexorably to the figure on stage. My own carefully constructed analytical detachment was fraying at the edges. The whiskey glass felt heavy, nearly forgotten in my hand. My breathing had become shallow, unconsciously mirroring the rhythm of the music. The exertion I witnessed, the methodical process of financial assessment and reasoned analysis that was my professional hallmark, had momentarily receded. I wasn't just observing a subject in a case, I was witnessing an unveiling. This wasn't just a dancer. This was the source of the intensity I'd first sensed in her confrontation with me at Veridian. That tightly coiled energy, the fierceness beneath the surface. Here it was, unleashed, given form and terrifying beauty. It was raw, primal, stripped bare under the harsh lights, even swathed in costume and convention. This felt more real, more authentic, than the controlled professional I'd encountered before. This was Elena, unmasked in a way, even while wearing one. A powerful wave of curiosity, sharper and more personal than my initial professional interest in the financial anomalies, surged through me. Who was this woman, who lived such starkly contrasting lives? Who contained this disciplined fury, this vulnerable power? The mystery of the financial irregularities suddenly became intertwined with the mystery of Elena herself. The performance wasn't just a clue. It was a revelation, deepening the enigma even as it illuminated it. I watched her final movements as the music reached a crashing crescendo and the lights snapped to black, leaving only the lingering image of her, fierce and luminous, burned onto the back of my eyelids. The investigative lines had blurred. The trail had led me not just to a hidden club, but into the heart of a far more complex and compelling enigma. The stage plunged into absolute blackness. The final, crashing chord of the music echoed for a heartbeat in the sudden void. Then silence descended, thick and heavy. For a long moment, the only sound was the collective, almost silent exhalation of the audience. Then, applause erupted. Not the wild cheering of a stadium, but a wave of intense, appreciative clapping, sharp and percussive in the enclosed space. It acknowledged the artistry, the exertion, the sheer force of what they had witnessed. I lowered my glass, the image of Elena, fierce, luminous, ephemeral, still searing behind my eyes. I forced myself to take a slow, steadying breath. The complex scents of the room rushing back in. Perfume, tobacco, ozone, whiskey, dusty. I tried to reassert my analytical mindset, pushing the raw emotion of the performance aside, filing away the image, the intensity, the questions it raised. The house lights, such as they were, subtly shifted, returning the room to its previous state of cultivated twilight. Staff moved silently in the periphery, collecting empty glasses, their movements fluid and unobtrusive. On stage, shadows flickered as unseen hands presumably cleared or reset for whatever came next. The brief, intense focus of the performance dissipated, allowing the room's ambient murmur to resurface, though it felt somehow changed, charged with the lingering energy of the dance. My gaze swept the room again, moving past the resettling patrons, drawn upwards. High above the main floor, recessed into the wall opposite the bar, was a shallow balcony or private booth, barely visible in the deep shadows. It hadn't been obviously occupied before, but now, leaning slightly against the railing, was a figure. I couldn't make out features clearly from this distance, and in the gloom, but the silhouette was large, substantial, radiating an aura of stillness and immense presence. Unlike the patrons below, this figure wasn't looking around or engaging in conversation. Their attention seemed fixed on the now empty stage, or perhaps on the area backstage where the dancers had exited. The posture was one of intense, proprietary focus, the stillness of someone surveying their domain. Even shrouded in shadow, the figure exuded control. The cut of the dark jacket seemed expensive, the shoulders broad. I thought I caught the briefest, dull gleam of gold, a cufflink perhaps, as the figure shifted slightly. Then, as a member of the floor staff passed below the booth, glancing upwards almost nervously, the shadowed figure gave a minimal, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a greeting, it was an acknowledgement, perhaps an instruction, delivered with absolute economy of motion. Ownership wasn't proclaimed here. It was simply understood, embedded in the deference of others, in the commanding quiet of the observer. I mentally tagged the figure, Owner 1, the silent watcher, the potential power behind this elaborate operation. The figure remained in the shadows, a locus of unseen power, as the ambient music swelled again. Something different now, slower, smokier, featuring a mournful saxophone weaving a lonely melody through complex electronic textures. I continued my scan, attuned to the subtle hierarchies and movements within the room, the way I would assess power dynamics in corporate boardrooms. My attention snagged on another individual, this one operating in the light, not hiding in the shadows. Moving with practiced ease near the entrance to a more brightly lit lounge area I hadn't noticed before, was a man who commanded attention differently. Tall, leaner than the figure in the booth, dressed in a suit of shimmering charcoal silk that seemed to catch and reflect the dim light. His hair was perfectly styled, silvering slightly at the temples, lending him an air of distinguished sophistication. He wasn't observing the room with detached intensity. He was engaging with it. He stopped to murmur something to a wealthy-looking older couple, eliciting low, appreciative laughter. He clasped the shoulder of another patron, leaning in to share a brief, confidential word. His charm felt genuine yet meticulously deployed, like a perfectly calibrated asset in a business portfolio. I watched him pause by the bar, exchanging a quiet word with the bartender, his eyes doing a swift, assessing sweep of the stock and the staff's efficiency. He moved smoothly, radiating a polished confidence, the scent of expensive citrus and cedarwood trailing faintly in his wake. This was owner 2, I surmised. The face of Nocturne, the maître de courrier of this exclusive underworld, ensuring the clientele felt welcomed, coddled, and impeccably managed. Was there a third? I wasn't certain. My gaze drifted toward the technical booth I could just glimpse near the back, partially hidden by a decorative screen. Inside, bathed in the cool blue-white glow of multiple monitors and mixing boards, someone was visible, mostly just a focused silhouette, headphones on, occasionally leaning forward to adjust a slider or tap a screen. Their concentration was absolute, directed entirely toward the soundscape and visuals unfolding in the club. Was this owner 3, the artist, the technician, the architect of Nocturne's immersive sensory experience? Or perhaps the third presence was even more elusive. I caught a fleeting impression of someone standing near a side exit, observing not the stage but the audience, their expression unreadable, detached, analytical, before melting back into a deeper shadow. This owner felt more enigmatic, their influence woven into the very atmosphere, the specific mood of the music, the precise timing of the lighting shifts, the overall aesthetic cohesion of the place, rather than asserted through direct presence or interaction. Theirs was a presence felt in the intricate design of the illusion itself. The pause between performances was brief. The stage lights shifted again, painting the space in hues of deep crimson and bruised violet. A different style of music began. Slower, more overtly sensual, dominated by a throbbing, hypnotic bass line and breathy, yearning vocals sung in a language I didn't recognize. A solo performer took the stage, their body clad in strips of dark red fabric that left much exposed, their movements sinuous and explicitly seductive. The performance was technically skilled but lacked the raw, untamed energy Elena had possessed. It felt more like a deliberate offering to the audience, rather than a personal exorcism. I watched, noting the subtle shift in the room's energy. Some patrons leaned forward, their interest piqued by the overt sensuality. Others seemed almost bored, sipping their drinks, their gaze distant. The experience here was clearly curated, offering different flavors of intensity, different reflections of desire. The interplay within Nocturne became clearer as I observed. The silent, efficient staff moved like ghosts, anticipating needs, replacing drinks, clearing tables with minimal interaction, their faces impassive masks of professional discretion. Their dark uniforms blended into the shadows, making them seem like extensions of the club itself. The audience, composed of wealthy patrons and artistic connoisseurs, consumed the performances, the atmosphere, the exclusivity. Drinks flowed. Quiet deals were perhaps murmured in shadowed booths, connections made or reinforced. Everything felt smooth, controlled, expensive. Yet beneath the polished surface I sensed the undercurrents, with the same instinct I'd honed detecting inconsistencies in corporate financial reports. The watchful eyes of the security personnel, never far away, the subtle deference shown not just to owner 2, but to certain patrons who carried themselves with an air of quiet authority. I saw the figure in the shadowed booth shift again, a silent reminder of the ultimate control overseeing the entire spectacle. The beauty and artistry on display felt inextricably linked to power, money, and perhaps a subtle form of exploitation. The expensive perfumes couldn't entirely mask the faint, sharp tang of something transactional. Something potentially predatory beneath the velvet glove. My CFO's eye for systemic inconsistencies detected it immediately. The slight power imbalance, the carefully maintained hierarchy, the commodification of artistry disguised as patronage. The atmosphere deepened as the night wore on, subsequent performances blurring into a hypnotic cycle of stylized sensuality, athletic prowess, and intense emotion. The air grew thicker, warmer, heavy with accumulated scents, and the psychic weight of unspoken desires. I finished my whiskey, the last drops burning slightly. The warmth did little to dispel a growing chill that had less to do with the room temperature, and more with the intricate, potentially dangerous web I felt closing in around me. I had followed a simple trail, financial irregularities at Veridian, a mysterious car, and found myself in a place where shadows danced, secrets were currency, and the lines between art, desire, and control were deliberately, dangerously blurred. My fascination with Elena was now tangled with a profound sense of unease about the gilded cage she performed in, and the unseen figures who held the keys. The whispers in the dark were starting to take shape, and they spoke of complex entanglements between Veridian and this underworld venue. The night deepened within Nocturne's timeless embrace. I remained by the pillar, nursing the last warmth of my whiskey, the ice long since melted into cool water. Another performance concluded on the main stage. This one, a display of almost unsettling physical contortion, set to sparse, experimental electronica. The applause was more scattered this time, appreciative but less visceral than it had been for Elena. Patrons began to move more freely, the spaces between tables filling with low conversation, the bar once again becoming a hub of quiet activity. The curated intensity relaxed slightly, shifting towards sophisticated mingling. I was about to turn, considering my exit, when I saw her. Elena. She emerged not from the stage area, but from one of the curtained alcoves near the back. She was no longer in her dramatic performance costume but wore simple, elegant black trousers and a dark silk blouse. Her hair was pulled back severely, and the stark stage makeup was gone, leaving her face pale and fine-boned under the ambient light. She looked composed but weary, holding herself with a distinct reserve as she spoke briefly, intently, to the charming owner too near the alcove's entrance. He leaned in, smiling, touching her arm lightly. Something growled inside of me at his intimate touch. After a brief exchange of words, she began walking across the main floor, her path taking her diagonally toward the area where I stood. Her gaze was focused ahead, navigating the patrons, seemingly oblivious. But as she drew nearer, her eyes lifted, sweeping briefly, almost unconsciously, across the room. And then, they met mine. For a fractional second, her stride faltered. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly, recognition flaring sharp and unmistakable within their depths. It was me, the man from Veridian, the board liaison, the financial investigator she'd confronted in the corridor. Surprise warred with something else. Alarm? Curiosity? I couldn't decipher the complex emotions that flickered there in the dim, forgiving light. Then, just as quickly, her professional mask snapped back into place, but not before her gaze sharpened, holding mine for one intense, deliberate beat. It wasn't overtly hostile, nor was it welcoming. It felt like a silent, urgent question suspended in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning, underscored by a definite flicker of warning. You shouldn't be here. Then she broke contact, looking straight ahead again, and continued walking, disappearing through another unmarked door near the main entrance antechamber. The brief, loaded exchange, lasting only seconds, landed like a physical jolt. It cut through my analytical detachment, striking something deeper. The raw power of her performance had unveiled her hidden depths. That single, penetrating gaze confirmed the danger, the complexity, her entanglement in this place. It was the hook, sunk deep. My initial professional curiosity about Veridian's finances, already amplified by the mesmerizing dance, now solidified into a driving, personal imperative. I had to understand her connection to Nocturne, the nature of the control exerted by the shadowy figures who ran this place, and how it all tied back to the financial anomalies at Veridian that had brought me here in the first place. It was no longer just a financial investigation. It was an enigma to be unraveled, centered on the compelling, contradictory woman who danced in shadows. I made a silent vow, the resolution settling cold and hard in my gut. I would be back, not just as a Stonewall investigator, but as someone irrevocably drawn into the orbit of whatever complex, potentially dangerous game was playing out between Veridian and Nocturne. I placed my empty glass carefully on the cool marble of the bar, leaving a generous tip beside it, the effortless gesture of a satisfied patron. I turned and walked toward the entrance, moving against the low thrum of the music, the swirl of expensive scents, the murmur of privileged conversations. The atmosphere felt different now, charged with personal significance, its seductive allure underscored by a palpable sense of menace. I passed through the antechamber, receiving another silent, assessing nod from the impassive guardian, and pushed open the heavy oak door. The thick, soundproof steel door clicked softly shut behind me, instantly severing the connection to Nocturne's meticulously crafted world. I was back in the alley. The air felt startlingly cool and damp against my face, carrying the mundane smells of wet pavement and distant exhaust fumes. The silence, compared to the club's immersive soundscape, felt vast and empty, amplifying the faint, rhythmic drip-drip of water from an unseen pipe. The transition was jarring, but the impressions lingered, clinging like the scent of smoke to my clothes. The pulsing bass line, the glint of silver thread in the spotlight, the weight of unspoken secrets in the air. The shadows of Nocturne were deep, its mysteries tangled, but it was the memory of Elena's eyes, surprised, warning, intensely alive in the manufactured twilight, that illuminated the dangerous path I knew, now, I had to tread. My investigation had just become significantly more complicated, and considerably more compelling.